Welcome, my Whispering Bee family. This is the story of Miley, a woman who spent 4.5 years believing she was building a future, only to be told she had to earn the very commitment she thought they were working toward. What followed wasn't just heartbreak, but a quiet unraveling of everything she thought love was supposed to be. It's a story about the red flags she overlooked, the moment that changed everything, and the strength it took to finally choose herself. Stay with me to discover how life slowly reroutes Miley from chaos to peace. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about friendship, love, heartbreak, and growth. This is about Miley and her ex-boyfriend Derek. And before you roll your eyes thinking this is just another breakup story, I need you to understand that this isn't about a breakup. This is about the moment when you realize that the person you've been building a future with has been keeping score the entire time. Miley was 23 when this happened. She'd been with Derek for 4.5 years, which when you're that young feels like forever, right? They'd basically grown up together. They met at their first real job out of college, both of them fresh-faced and terrified, wearing clothes that were slightly too formal because neither of them really knew what business casual meant yet. She was 19, he was 20. They were both working at this mid-sized marketing firm in the city, the kind of place where everyone's enthusiastic in that slightly desperate way that entry-level employees are. You know the type, where people actually show up to the optional happy hours and pretend to care about team-building exercises. Miley was in the design department, Derek was in account management. They met in the break room, and I love this detail because it's so ordinary. He was struggling with the coffee machine, which apparently had this whole complicated system that nobody had bothered to explain to him, and Miley showed him how to work it. That's it. That's the big romantic meet cute. She showed him how to make coffee. But the thing is, he made her laugh. He did this silly voice pretending to be the coffee machine, giving it this whole personality, and she laughed so hard she snorted, which she was always self-conscious about, but he told her it was cute. And that was it for her. She was done. They started dating 3 weeks later. He asked her out after a company presentation where she designed the slides and he'd handled the client, and they'd worked together for the first time. Everything felt easy, natural, like they just fit. And for a while, they really did. The first year was good, really good. They did all the normal early relationship stuff. They explored the city together, tried new restaurants they couldn't really afford, stayed up too late talking about everything and nothing. Derek was attentive back then. He'd remember little things she mentioned in passing. She once said she liked sunflowers, and the next week he showed up with a single sunflower from the bodega near his apartment. It wasn't expensive or elaborate, but it made her feel seen. He met her family that first Thanksgiving. She has this big, loud family, the kind where everyone talks over each other and her mom makes enough food to feed a small army. Derek was nervous, she could tell, but he won them over. Her dad, who's usually pretty reserved with boyfriends, actually laughed at Derek's jokes. Her little brother, who was 15 at the time and generally thought everyone was lame, said Derek was pretty cool for an old person. Miley met his family that Christmas. It was different, quieter. His parents were nice but formal in a way that made her feel like she was being evaluated. His mom asked a lot of questions about her career plans and whether she wanted children someday, which felt a little intense for a first meeting. But Derek laughed it off later and told her his mom was just like that with everyone. By their second year, they'd moved in together, split a one-bedroom apartment that was too small and too expensive, but it was theirs. They fell into routines. She'd make coffee in the morning while he showered. He'd pick up groceries on his way home from work. They'd cook dinner together most nights, terrible pasta experiments and overcooked chicken, learning as they went. There were good moments scattered throughout. Their third anniversary, he surprised her with a weekend trip to this little cabin upstate. No cell service, just them and a lake and a lot of bad board games they found in a closet. They stayed up all night talking about the future, where they wanted to live someday, whether they wanted a dog or a cat, how many kids they might want, all those conversations that feel important and binding when you're in love. He proposed a toast that night. She remembers this so clearly. He raised his mug of hot chocolate and said, "To us, to building something real." And she believed him. She really, truly believed that they were building something together. But here's the thing about building something together. Both people have to be using the same blueprint. Looking back, Miley can see the moments when things started to shift. It wasn't sudden. It never is it? It was gradual, like someone turning down the volume so slowly you don't notice until suddenly you're straining to hear. The first red flag, though she didn't recognize it as one at the time, came about 2.5 years in. They were at his company's holiday party. Miley had spent weeks planning what to wear, had gotten her hair done, felt really good about herself. She was talking to one of Derek's coworkers' wives, this woman named Jessica who was funny and warm, and they were really hitting it off. Derek came over and sort of steered Miley away, hand on her lower back, big smile on his face. But once they were alone by the bar, he leaned in and said, "You were talking really loud back there. Jessica's husband is my boss's boss. Maybe tone it down a bit." Miley laughed, thought he was joking, but he wasn't smiling anymore. He said, "I'm serious, Miley. You get really animated sometimes, and it's a bit much for these kinds of events. I just need you to be more aware." She felt her face get hot. Suddenly she was hyper-aware of every word coming out of her mouth for the rest of the night. She barely talked to anyone else. Derek seemed happier. He kept his arm around her, kissed her temple, told her she looked beautiful. And she told herself she was being too sensitive. He was just trying to help her make a good impression, right? But it planted something, this little seed of doubt, the idea that maybe she was too much, too loud, too animated, too something. The second red flag was about 6 months later. They'd been talking about taking a vacation, somewhere tropical, maybe Mexico or the Caribbean. Miley had been saving up her vacation days and some money from a freelance project she'd done on the side. She was excited. She started looking at flights, sending Derek links to hotels. One night, she brought it up at dinner. She'd found this amazing deal on a resort, pulled it up on her phone to show him, and Derek barely looked at it. He said, "That's nice, baby, but I don't think we can swing it right now. I've got some stuff coming up with work and money's tight." Miley said that was fine, they could wait a few months. But then Derek ordered takeout that weekend. Expensive sushi, the kind with the fancy presentation. And the next week, he came home with a new pair of sneakers, limited edition, something he'd been wanting. When Miley pointed out that maybe they could have put that money toward the vacation, he got defensive. He said, "I work hard. I'm allowed to treat myself sometimes. You're always talking about self-care and treating yourself, but when I do it, suddenly it's a problem." And Miley backed off because he was right, wasn't he? She did talk about self-care. She didn't want to be the girlfriend who nagged about money, so she dropped it. But the vacation never happened. And Derek kept buying things for himself while telling her they needed to be more careful with money. The third red flag was more subtle. It was the way he started talking about their relationship in terms of transactions. Not all the time, not in an obvious way, but enough that Miley started noticing the pattern. Like when she asked him to come to her company's event, just a casual art gallery opening that her firm was hosting. He said, "I went to that thing with your family last month, so I think we're even for a while." Or when she was sick with the flu and asked if he could pick up some soup and medicine on his way home. He did it, but when he got there, he said, "You owe me one," and she couldn't tell if he was joking. Or when they'd make plans and she'd want to see a certain movie or try a certain restaurant, and he'd say, "Okay, but next time we're doing what I want." As if being in a relationship was about taking turns being happy instead of wanting each other to be happy. Miley started keeping track in her head without meaning to. Not because she wanted to, but because Derek had made it feel like she needed to. She found herself thinking things like, "Well, he picked the restaurant last week, so I can suggest something this week." Or, "I chose the last show we binged, so he gets to pick now." It's exhausting, living like that, keeping score, making sure everything's even. Relationships aren't supposed to be a constant negotiation of who owes who what. But the fourth red flag, the one she definitely should have seen as the massive warning it was, came about 4 months before the big blow-up. They were talking about weddings in the abstract, the way couples do when they're not quite ready to talk about it concretely, but want to test the waters. Miley's cousin had just gotten engaged, and the family was all excited about it. Miley mentioned that she'd always liked the idea of a small wedding, nothing huge, just close family and friends, maybe somewhere outdoors. Derek said, "Weddings are such a waste of money. I don't get why people spend thousands of dollars on one day." Miley agreed to an extent. She said she didn't need anything extravagant, but she did want it to be meaningful, special. And Derek said, "If we ever get married, we're doing it at the courthouse. I'm not spending my money on a party for other people." The way he said my money stuck with her. Not our money. Not we should be smart about it. My money. She didn't say anything at the time. Just filed it away in that growing folder in her brain labeled things that bother me, but I don't know if they should. So this is where Miley was emotionally when the big conversation happened. 4.5 years in. She was 23, he was 24. They'd been living together for over 2 years. She wasn't pushing for an engagement, wasn't dropping hints about rings, wasn't doing any of that stuff that people complain about. She just wanted to talk about the future because that's what you do in a serious relationship, right? You check in. You make sure you're both heading in the same direction. They were on the couch. She remembers what she was wearing, these old sweatpants and one of his hoodies that she'd basically claimed as hers. It was a random Tuesday night. Nothing special. They'd just finished watching some show, and in that quiet moment before they decided what to do next, Miley brought it up. She said something like, "I've been thinking about where we're headed, like long-term." Derek didn't look away from his phone. He said, "What about it?" And Miley said, "I just want to make sure we're on the same page, about the future, about us." He put his phone down then, said, "Okay, what's on your mind?" So she told him, not in a demanding way, not with ultimatums or pressure. She said she loved him, that she saw a future with him, that she wasn't asking to get engaged tomorrow, but she wanted to know if that was something he was thinking about too, if marriage was part of his plan for them. Derek said it was. He said of course he thought about marrying her. They'd been together for 4.5 years, he'd be crazy not to think about it. Miley felt relieved, like they were finally on the same page, so she kept going. She mentioned that when the time came, she hoped they could talk about it together, that she'd always thought an engagement ring should be something meaningful, not something that puts anyone in debt, but something that shows thought and intention. And that's when Derek's whole demeanor changed. He said, "So you're already thinking about how much I should spend on a ring?" Miley said no, that's not what she meant. She was just saying that when the time comes, she hopes it's something that reflects the importance of the commitment. That's all. Derek leaned back, crossed his arms. He had this look on his face that Miley had seen before but couldn't quite name. Something between annoyance and amusement, like he was dealing with a child who didn't understand how the world worked. He said, "You know what? If I'm going to spend money on a ring, you're going to have to earn it." Miley laughed. She actually laughed because she thought he was joking. She said something like, "What are you talking about?" But Derek wasn't laughing. He said, "I'm serious. What do you do for me in this relationship? What makes you think you deserve an expensive ring?" And Miley just sat there, frozen, because what do you even say to that? She tried to process it, tried to figure out if she'd misunderstood. She said, "Derek, we're in a relationship. We love each other. We make each other happy. We have fun together. That's what we do for each other." And he scoffed, actually scoffed. He said, "That's not an answer, Miley. I'm talking about actual contributions. What do you bring to the table?" This is the moment, right? This is the moment when Miley should have stood up and walked out, when she should have seen this for exactly what it was. A man who viewed their relationship as a transaction, who thought love was something you earned through performance and productivity, who saw her as someone who needed to prove her worth instead of someone he was lucky to be with. But she didn't walk out, not yet. Instead, she did something that she's embarrassed about now, but I want to talk about it because I think it's important. She pulled out her phone and opened ChatGPT. She typed in something like, "My boyfriend told me I need to earn an engagement ring. Is this a red flag?" And look, I know some people are going to have opinions about this, about asking AI for relationship advice. But here's the thing, Miley was in shock. She was questioning her own perception of reality because the person she loved and trusted was telling her that her understanding of relationships was wrong. She needed something, anything, to confirm that her gut reaction was valid. ChatGPT gave her the answer she already knew. Yes, this is problematic. Yes, this suggests a transactional view of relationships. Yes, this indicates a lack of respect. All the things that her brain was screaming at her, but that her heart didn't want to believe. So she read it to him, the ChatGPT response, every point. And Derek exploded. He said, "Are you seriously going to ask ChatGPT everything? Get the fuck out of here with that shit." His voice was loud, angry in a way she'd rarely seen, and suddenly Miley wasn't sad anymore. She was clear, crystal clear. She stood up, grabbed her keys, didn't say a word, just left. She drove to her best friend Rachel's apartment, the friend she'd known since college, the one who'd always had reservations about Derek but loved Miley too much to push too hard. Rachel opened the door, took one look at Miley's face, and pulled her inside. Miley told her everything, the whole conversation. The earn it comment, the ChatGPT thing, all of it. And Rachel, beautiful, blunt Rachel, said, "Thank goodness, I've been waiting for you to see it." Turns out Rachel had noticed things too. The way Derek would subtly put Miley down in group settings. The way he'd make jokes at her expense and then tell her she was too sensitive when she didn't laugh. The way he controlled their social calendar but made it seem like he was just being decisive. The way he'd committed to plans with his friends without checking with her, but expected her to always be available when he wanted her to be. Miley stayed at Rachel's that night. She didn't hear from Derek, not a text, not a call, nothing. And that told her everything she needed to know. The next day, she was still at Rachel's, trying to figure out what to do next when her phone buzzed. A text from Derek's mom, just checking in, asking if everything was okay, mentioning that Derek had seemed stressed lately. That made Miley angry in a way the rest of it hadn't. The idea that Derek was painting himself as the stressed victim in all of this. That his mom was reaching out to her instead of Derek having the decency to communicate directly. She didn't respond to his mom. Instead, she sat down and wrote out exactly what she wanted to say to Derek. She wrote it, deleted it, wrote it again. Finally landed on something that felt true. The message said, "I've had time to think about what you said last night and how the conversation ended. Being told I need to earn commitment and being spoken to the way I was changed how I feel about this relationship. What you said makes me feel like I'm wasting my time and that you don't actually want to marry me. This has also been part of a pattern for months. I don't feel respected or valued anymore, and I don't want to continue in a relationship where my worth is questioned. I've decided it's best for me to end things. I'll come by this weekend to get my stuff when you're not there." She sent it, turned off her phone, and cried for about 3 hours straight. Derek's response came later that evening. Rachel read it first, then handed the phone to Miley with this look that said, "Brace yourself." His text was long, defensive. He said that the problem was the way she demanded things, like expecting a certain percentage of his income to go toward a ring. Which, for the record, Miley had never said. She'd never mentioned percentages or specific amounts, but Derek had somehow translated meaningful and intentional into expensive demand. He said he was asked for stuff every day and got her everything he could. That he did a lot for her and felt like it went unnoticed. That he felt like her servant. That gifts should be appreciated, not expected. That she didn't appreciate anything he did. And then, the kicker. "You want to ask ChatGPT if I'm the red flag? Look in the mirror." Miley read it 3 times. Each time she expected to feel something different. Guilt, maybe, doubt, the urge to apologize, but all she felt was tired, so incredibly tired. Because here's what Derek's response told her. He didn't hear her. He didn't understand what she was saying. Or worse, he understood perfectly and was choosing to twist it into something where he was the victim and she was the demanding, ungrateful girlfriend. She didn't respond. What was the point? The pattern Derek described in his text, where he felt unappreciated and like a servant, that was interesting, though. Because Miley had spent the last few months feeling exactly the same way, like nothing she did was good enough. Like every act of love was being measured and weighed and found wanting. Just 2 weeks before the big fight, Derek had gotten mad at her for not having dinner ready when he got home from work, even though they both worked full-time and had never established that cooking was her responsibility. He'd said, "I work hard all day. It would be nice to come home to a meal sometimes." Miley had pointed out that she also worked hard all day, and if he wanted dinner ready when he got home, maybe they could take turns cooking or plan it together. He'd rolled his eyes and ordered pizza, but the tension lasted all night. Or the time, about 3 months before, when Miley had been excited about a potential promotion at work. She'd come home buzzing with the news that her boss wanted to put her forward for a senior designer position. It would mean more responsibility, more money, more opportunity. Derek's first response was, "Does that mean you'll be working later hours?" Not congratulations, not "I'm proud of you," just concern about how it would affect him. When Miley said it might mean some later nights sometimes, he'd said, "I guess I'll just be here alone more then." Like her career advancement was a personal inconvenience to him rather than something they should both be celebrating. Or the time she'd asked him to go to her grandmother's birthday party. Her grandmother, who was turning 85, who Miley was really close to. Derek had said, "Do I have to? Your family things are always so long and I don't really know what to talk to your relatives about." Miley had said yes, it was important to her. He went, but he was on his phone the whole time, barely engaging, leaving early and making her choose between staying with her family or leaving with him to avoid him being annoyed. These were the patterns, the moments that had been adding up. The times when Derek's comfort and convenience mattered more than Miley's feelings or needs. When her excitement was met with logistics. When her family was an obligation rather than people he cared about because she cared about them. So when Derek accused her of being demanding and unappreciative, Miley almost laughed. Because she'd been bending herself into shapes to accommodate him for months, maybe longer, and he saw it as her not doing enough. That weekend, Miley went to the apartment when Derek was at his buddy's place watching football. She'd coordinated with Rachel, who came with her for moral support and to help pack. Walking into that apartment was surreal. Everything looked the same. Their pictures were still on the wall. Her plants were still on the windowsill, though they looked a little sad, like Derek hadn't been watering them. The coffee maker they'd bought together was still on the counter. Miley packed efficiently. Clothes, toiletries, books, the few pieces of furniture that were hers. She left the pictures on the wall, left the coffee maker, left the life they'd built because it had never really been theirs, had it? It had been his life that she was living in. She did take one thing that maybe she shouldn't have. There was this mug, just a regular ceramic mug, nothing special. But it was from their first trip together to this tiny beach town about 2 hours away. They'd stopped at this quirky little shop and found these mugs with terrible puns on them. Miley said, "Whole latte love," and Derek said, "You mocha me crazy." They'd thought it was hilarious at the time. Miley took her mug, left his on the shelf, figured it was a fair trade for 4.5 years. She left her key on the kitchen counter, didn't leave a note. What was there to say that she hadn't already said? As she was loading the last box into Rachel's car, a neighbor, Mrs. Chen from 3B, came out. She'd always been kind to Miley, had them over for dumplings once, always said hi in the hallway. Mrs. Chen said, "Moving out." Miley just nodded. Mrs. Chen looked at her for a long moment, then said something that Miley thinks about all the time now. She said, "Good. You always looked a little small next to him, like you were trying not to take up too much space." Miley had never thought about it that way, but Mrs. Chen was right. She had been making herself smaller, quieter, less demanding, less everything, trying to be the girl who was easy and low maintenance and didn't ask for too much. And it still wasn't enough for Derek, because the problem was never about what Miley did or didn't do. The problem was that Derek saw relationships as zero-sum games. If she won, he lost. If she was happy, it was at his expense. If she expected commitment, she was demanding something from him rather than them building something together. You can't win a game like that. The only way to win is not to play. The first few weeks after the breakup were hard. Really hard. Miley moved in with Rachel temporarily, slept on her couch, cried more than she'd like to admit. She missed Derek, or at least she missed the version of Derek she'd thought he was. The one who brought her sunflowers and made her laugh in the break room and talked about building something real. She missed the routines, the familiarity, coming home to someone, inside jokes, shared meals. She missed having a person. But more than that, she was angry. At Derek, yes, but also at herself. For staying so long, for ignoring the signs, for making excuses, for believing that if she just tried harder, was better, did more, he would value her the way she deserved to be valued. Rachel was amazing during this time. She let Miley feel all her feelings without trying to rush her through them. When Miley wanted to talk about Derek, Rachel listened. When Miley wanted to ugly cry over rom-coms and eat ice cream for dinner, Rachel joined her. When Miley needed silence, Rachel gave her space. One night, about 3 weeks after the breakup, Miley said, "Do you think I made a mistake?" And Rachel said, "Do you?" Miley thought about it. She said, "No, but I wish I didn't have to make the choice at all. I wish he'd been different." Rachel said, "He showed you who he was. You just finally believed him." That helped. The idea that Miley hadn't been blind or stupid or naive. She'd been hopeful. She'd been giving someone she loved the benefit of the doubt. That's not a character flaw. That's being human. Derek, to his credit or maybe just to his pride, didn't reach out. No texts asking her to reconsider. No late-night calls begging her to come back. Nothing. And honestly, that made it easier. It confirmed what Miley had suspected, that Derek's ego mattered more to him than she did. She heard through mutual friends that Derek was telling people they'd grown apart, that it was mutual, that they wanted different things, which was technically true but also completely missed the point. When people asked Miley about it, she kept it simple. She just said it didn't work out, that they were on different pages about the future. She didn't trash him, didn't tell everyone what he'd said, not because she was protecting him, but because she was protecting herself. She didn't want to be the girl who couldn't stop talking about her ex. She wanted to move forward. Miley threw herself into work, took on extra projects, stayed late, focused on that promotion she'd been going for, and 3 months after the breakup, she got it. Senior designer, better pay, her own small team. It felt like proof of something, though she wasn't quite sure what. Her boss took her out for a celebratory drink, said, "You seem different lately, more confident." Miley thought about that. She did feel different, like she'd been carrying around this weight she hadn't even realized was there, and suddenly it was gone. She didn't have to worry about being too loud or too much or too demanding. She could just be herself. She started doing things she'd stopped doing while she was with Derek. She took a pottery class, something she'd mentioned once, and he'd dismissed as a waste of money. She went out with coworkers after work without checking in about whether Derek minded. She spent a weekend visiting her grandmother without it being a negotiation. She started dating again about 6 months after the breakup. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and dinners. Getting to know new people. Remembering what it felt like to have someone ask about her day and actually listen to the answer. To have someone suggest an activity and ask if she'd like that rather than telling her what they were doing. She had a few dates that went nowhere. One guy who talked about his ex the entire time. Another who was nice enough but had the personality of plain yogurt. A third who asked her to split the bill down to the cent, including calculating the tax on her individual items, which was such a bizarre echo of Derek's scorekeeping that she almost laughed. But then, 8 months after the breakup, Miley met James. She met him, of all places, at a dog park, which is funny because Miley didn't have a dog. Rachel had gotten a puppy, this chaotic little golden retriever named Biscuit, and Miley had volunteered to take him out one Saturday morning while Rachel was at work. Biscuit was a disaster, adorable but a disaster. He pulled on the leash, jumped on everyone, tried to eat a discarded sandwich wrapper. Miley was out of her depth, clearly struggling, when this guy came over with his own dog, a much calmer border collie, and offered to help. That was James. He was 27, worked as a physical therapist, had a smile that made his whole face light up. He showed Miley some tips for getting Biscuit to calm down, and they ended up talking for almost an hour while the dogs played. Before Miley left, James asked if she came to the park often. Miley admitted it wasn't her dog. James laughed and said that was the best dog park pickup strategy he'd ever seen. Miley said, "What, pretending to have a dog?" And James said, "No, being so beautifully terrible at handling one that someone has to come help you." He asked for her number. She gave it to him. They went out for coffee the next week. That first date was easy in a way that dates with Derek never had been, even at the beginning. James asked questions and listened to the answers. He told her about his work, about his family, about the book he was reading. He didn't perform or posture or try to impress her with how successful or busy or important he was. When the check came, he paid, but when Miley offered to split it, he didn't make a big deal out of it either way. He just said, "I've got it, but next time you can get it if you want." And that word, next time, made Miley's stomach flip in the best way. They started seeing each other regularly. James would text her good morning, not because he needed something, but just to say he was thinking about her. He'd ask about her work projects and remember details from previous conversations. He'd suggest date ideas and actually ask if she'd enjoy them rather than just assuming. The first time Miley met James's friends, about a month into dating, she was nervous. She remembered Derek's company party, the way he'd made her feel like she needed to perform and be less of herself. But James introduced her with this obvious pride in his voice. Said, "This is Miley. She's brilliant and funny, and she's going to destroy all of you at trivia." And when Miley did, in fact, know a bunch of obscure answers and help their team win, James kissed her cheek and said, "Told you." He never made her feel like she was too much. When she got excited about something and talked fast with her hands moving everywhere, he smiled like he loved watching her. When she laughed too loud at a joke, he didn't shush her or look embarrassed. He just looked happy that she was happy. 3 months in, they had their first real disagreement. They were planning a weekend trip, and Miley wanted to go hiking upstate, but James had been thinking about visiting his brother in Boston. Instead of it becoming a thing, James just said, "Okay, what if we do Boston this time because I haven't seen my brother in months, and we plan a hiking trip for next month? Would that work?" And Miley, who'd been bracing for a fight or for him to pull the "I went to your thing so you owe me" card, just stood there for a second before saying yes, that worked. James noticed. He said, "You okay?" Miley said, "Yeah, that was easy." And James said, "Why wouldn't it be?" That's when Miley knew. This was different. This was what it was supposed to feel like. 6 months into dating, Miley told James about Derek. Not everything, but enough. About the "earn it" comment. About how the relationship had made her feel small. James listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, then said, "I'm glad you left. And I'm glad that asshole's loss is my gain. But mostly I'm glad you knew you deserved better." Miley said, "I almost didn't leave." James said, "But you did. That's what matters." They got serious quickly after that. It wasn't rushed exactly, but it was intentional. They talked about what they wanted, where they saw things going. James was clear that he saw a future with her. He didn't play games or keep her guessing. He just told her. A year into dating, James started looking at rings. Miley didn't know this at the time, but he told her later that he'd asked Rachel for advice, wanted to know what Miley might like. Rachel, who'd become friends with James too by this point, helped him pick out a ring that was perfect. Not the most expensive or the biggest, but thoughtful. A vintage setting with a sapphire, because Miley had once mentioned she loved sapphires more than diamonds. James proposed on a random Tuesday. They'd just finished dinner, were doing dishes together, and James just said, "I love this." Miley said, "What dishes?" And James said, "This, us, the boring parts. I love coming home to you. I love doing dishes with you. I love everything about building a life with you." Then he got down on one knee right there in the kitchen with dish soap on his hands and asked her to marry him. Miley said yes before he even finished the question. They got married 8 months later. Small ceremony, just family and close friends. Outdoors like Miley had always wanted at this little vineyard upstate. It was simple and beautiful and exactly right. James cried during his vows. He said he felt like the luckiest person alive. That Miley made him want to be better. That he couldn't wait to spend the rest of his life making her as happy as she made him. Miley's vows talked about finding someone who made her feel like she could take up space, like her joy mattered, like love wasn't something you earned, but something you built together. Rachel was Miley's maid of honor. During her speech, she said, "I've never seen Miley happier. James, you love her loudly and obviously and without keeping score. That's all I ever wanted for her." 2 years into marriage, Miley and James had a daughter. They named her Sophie. She had James's smile and Miley's laugh and a personality that was entirely her own from day one. Miley loved being a mom. It was hard, obviously, all the sleepless nights and constant worry and the way your heart just walks around outside your body from that point forward. But it was also joyful in a way she hadn't expected. The little moments, Sophie's laugh, the way she reached for Miley in the morning, the tiny hand wrapped around her finger. James was an incredible dad. He split everything 50-50 without being asked. Night feedings, diaper changes, bath time. He didn't act like he was babysitting his own kid or helping out. He was just parenting, being a dad. They were happy, really, genuinely happy. The kind of happy that doesn't mean nothing ever goes wrong, but that when things do go wrong, you handle it together. And then, 5 years after Miley walked out of that apartment, 5 years after she sent that breakup text, she ran into Derek. She was at a coffee shop near her office. Sophie was with James, who'd taken the day off to hang out with her. Miley was grabbing a latte before a meeting, scrolling through her phone while waiting in line. Someone said, "Miley." She looked up, and there was Derek. He looked the same but different. Same face, same build, but something about him seemed diminished somehow. Smaller. Or maybe Miley had just grown enough that he didn't loom as large in her memory anymore. "Derek," she said. "Hi." He smiled, but it didn't quite reach his eyes. Asked how she'd been. She said good, really good. Asked how he was. Derek said fine. Work was good. He'd gotten a promotion, bought a condo. All the markers of success that are supposed to mean you've made it. They did that awkward small talk thing for a minute. Then Derek asked if she wanted to grab a coffee with him, catch up properly. Miley's first instinct was to say no. She didn't owe him anything. Didn't need closure or reconnection or whatever this was. But something made her say yes. Maybe curiosity. Maybe the desire to prove to herself that he didn't have any power over her anymore. They sat down at a table by the window. Derek asked about her life. Miley told him she was married, had a daughter, loved her job, kept it surface level. Derek said he was single, had dated on and off but nothing serious. Said he was focused on his career right now. There was a pause. Then Derek said, "I think about you sometimes, about us, what we could have been." And Miley felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no vindication. Just a mild curiosity about where he was going with this. Derek continued, "I was young and stupid. I handled things badly. I've thought a lot about that conversation we had, and I wish I could take it back." Miley said, "Which part?" Derek said, "The part where I made you feel like you had to earn my love. You were right to leave. I was an idiot." It was weird hearing him say it. The apology she might have wanted 5 years ago, but now it felt hollow. Not because it wasn't sincere necessarily, but because it didn't change anything. It didn't matter anymore. Miley said, "I appreciate you saying that." Derek leaned forward. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we'd stayed together, if I'd handled it differently?" And this is the moment that Miley thinks about now when she tells this story, because this is where she could see it all so clearly. Derek wasn't apologizing because he'd genuinely grown or changed. He was apologizing because he'd lost something and now wanted to know if he could get it back, or at least wanted to believe it was still possible. She could see the emptiness in him. The way he'd built this life that looked successful on paper but hadn't filled whatever void he'd been trying to fill. He'd wanted Miley to earn his love, to prove she was worthy of his commitment, and in doing so, he'd proven he wasn't worthy of hers. Miley said, "Honestly, no, I don't wonder that." Derek looked surprised. Miley continued, "I'm happy, really happy. I have a husband who treats me like a partner, not a scorekeeper. I have a daughter who lights up my whole world. I have a life I love. I don't spend time thinking about alternate versions of it." She softened a little because despite everything, she didn't hate him. She just didn't feel anything for him at all. "I hope you find that too, whatever makes you happy, but it was never going to be us." Derek nodded, looked down at his coffee, said, "He's lucky, your husband." Miley said, "I'm lucky too, that's how it's supposed to work." Her phone buzzed. A text from James with a picture of Sophie covered in what looked like yogurt, laughing at the camera. The text said, "Snack time is going great." Miley smiled without meaning to. The kind of smile that takes over your whole face before you realize it's happening. She stood up. "I need to get to my meeting. It was good to see you, Derek. I hope things work out for you." Derek stood too, said, "Miley, wait, can I just say one more thing?" She paused. He said, "I lost you because I didn't understand that love isn't about what someone can do for you. It's about what you build together. I get that now. I just got it too late." Miley felt a surge of something. Not love, not even affection, but maybe compassion. Because she could see that he did understand now, and that understanding was its own punishment. Knowing what he'd lost and why he'd lost it. She said, "You'll find someone. Just make sure you treat them better than you treated me." Then she left, walked out of that coffee shop and back into her life. Her real life. The one she'd built with someone who never asked her to earn his love because he understood that love isn't a transaction. That night, she told James about running into Derek. James listened, then said, "How do you feel?" Miley thought about it. "Grateful. I'm grateful he said what he said 5 years ago, because if he hadn't, I might have stayed. I might have kept making myself smaller, thinking that was what love required, and I would never have found you." James pulled her close. "I'm grateful too, for whatever cosmic series of events led you to that dog park with Rachel's disaster puppy." Miley laughed. "Biscuit is the real hero of our love story." Sophie toddled over, wanting to be picked up. James scooped her up, and she giggled, that pure, unself-conscious child giggle that's the best sound in the world. This was her life. This was what she'd almost missed out on because she'd been trying to convince someone to value her. The thing about Derek's apology is that it didn't change the past. It didn't erase the way he'd made her feel. But it did give Miley something she didn't know she needed. Confirmation that she'd been right. That her gut instinct, the one that told her to walk away, had been spot on. Because here's what Miley knows now that she didn't know at 23. You can't convince someone to treat you right. Either they understand that you're valuable, or they don't. Either they want to build something with you, or they want you to fit into something they've already built. Either they see you as a partner, or they see you as a supporting character in their story. And the moment someone asks you to earn their love, the moment they make you feel like you have to prove you're worth their commitment, that's the moment you know they're not your person. Your person doesn't keep score. Your person doesn't measure your worth by what you can do for them. Your person celebrates your wins instead of worrying about how they affect the relationship. Your person wants you to take up space, to be loud, to be fully yourself. Your person makes you feel lucky that they chose you, and you make them feel the same way. That's how it works. That's what it's supposed to feel like. Miley sometimes thinks about alternate timelines. What if she'd stayed with Derek after that fight? What if she'd apologized, convinced herself she was being too demanding, tried harder to be whatever he wanted her to be? She would have missed everything. This life, this love, this version of herself that knows her worth and refuses to settle for anything less than she deserves. And yeah, sometimes she still sees that coffee mug when she's making her morning coffee. The whole latte love, won from their first trip together. She kept it, not because she misses Derek or wants to hold on to the past, but because it reminds her of something important. It reminds her that she once loved someone who couldn't love her back the way she deserved, and that she was strong enough to walk away, and that walking away led her to everything she has now. That's the thing about leaving something that's not right for you. It doesn't just end something. It makes space for something better. Miley's story isn't unique. So many people stay in relationships where they're undervalued, where they're made to feel like they're asking for too much, where love feels like a constant negotiation. They stay because of time invested, or because they're afraid of starting over, or because they've been convinced that this is as good as it gets. But it's not. This is not as good as it gets. If someone makes you feel like you need to earn their love, they don't understand what love is. If someone talks about your relationship like it's a business transaction, they're not ready to be in a relationship. If someone makes you feel small or less than or like you're too much, they're not your person. Your person exists. The love you deserve exists. But you have to be willing to walk away from what's not right to find it. Miley walked away. It was hard. It hurt. There were nights when she doubted herself, when she almost reached out to Derek, when she felt like maybe she'd made a mistake. But she didn't go back. She sat with the discomfort. She leaned on her friends. She focused on herself and her career, and figuring out who she was outside of that relationship. And then, when she wasn't even looking for it, she found James. Or he found her. Or they found each other. However you want to phrase it. But the important part is that she was only available to find that love because she'd made space for it. Because she'd refused to settle for someone who saw her as less than she was. But for Miley, the lesson had come right on time. She'd learned that her worth wasn't negotiable. That love shouldn't require performance or constant proof. That the right person would never ask her to earn what they should be giving freely. She'd learned that walking away isn't giving up. Sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do. So if you're reading this, or if you're in a situation that feels even a little bit like Miley's, I want you to hear this. You don't have to earn love. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to make yourself smaller to make someone else comfortable. The right person will see you clearly and love you fully. They'll want to build with you, not ask you to fit into what they've already built. They'll celebrate your wins instead of worrying about how they affect the relationship. They'll make you feel bigger, not smaller. And if someone can't give you that, if someone asks you to earn what should be freely given, you have permission to walk away. You have permission to choose yourself. You have permission to wait for the love you deserve. Because it exists, and it's worth waiting for, and you are worth it. That's the difference between someone who sees your worth and someone who makes you prove it. Choose the person who sees it, or be alone until they come along. But don't waste your time trying to convince someone you're valuable. You are valuable, end of story. And the person who's right for you will never ask you to earn what they should be giving freely.